The assassination of Russia's General Kirillov, head of the country's chemical, biological and nuclear defense, has resonated in Indonesia. Back in 2022, he revealed the presence of American biolabs in Jakarta. That triggered a massive investigation. Over now to RT's Indonesia bureau chief, shedding light on this story.
The news about the death of Igor Kirillov, the head of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical troops, spread quite quickly. And here in Southeast Asia, it caused a lot of stir. Early this morning, local media started inquiring about it, writing about it. We saw reports on local television in Indonesia. Igor Kirillov was quoted frequently by Indonesian media, but the subject was not always connected with Ukraine. I know that in many cases he commented at his briefings about American involvement in biological experiments and biological laboratories in Ukraine. That was the biggest case that we saw in 2022 that made it to Southeast Asia. And actually, I did an investigative news piece, journalistic investigation on the connection between, the possible connection between Ukrainian biological experiments and laboratories of the United States and the labs that were functioning here in Southeast Asia. In 2022, Igor Kirillov mentioned in one of his briefings the American Namru 2 lab, which was operating in Indonesia until 2012. He mentioned that this is one of the facilities which was shut down by local authorities, and local media has definitely become interested in this. They picked up the report, and they did several news pieces. Portals like DITIC run a thorough investigation of American activities in Indonesia pre and after 2012. Basically, a biological laboratory was in Jakarta, a big city, which now hosts numerous facilities, which now is a home to more than 11 million people. The health minister at that time, Siti Fadila Supari, she became curious about possible connections between the activities of American troops and American military personnel, which was working here at this lab, as it has involvement by the American diplomatic and military personnel. So she was trying to dig further into this. She had her suspicions about possible connections between the outbreak of avian influenza in 2009 in Indonesia and the activities, the experiments of biological nature here on Indonesian soil performed by the US. So what she did is she did a lot to convince the authorities to close down the laboratory. She was quite active at that, and all the way until her until the end of her term as the minister, she made all possible attempts to close it. Apparently there was a lot of resistance from the American side, from the American diplomats. If we take cable leaks by Julian Assange's WikiLeaks, we saw reports about American diplomats trying to convince Indonesians to keep the lab in the country. And what the Indonesian journalists did after they heard Igor Kirillov's statements in 2022 about Indonesia and about Ukrainian biolabs, they actually went further and they investigated whether there was or there could have been any possible American biological research activity, especially with involvement of the US military on the Indonesian soil after 2012, when Namru 2 lab ceased to exist. So basically what the Indonesian journalists from DITIC have come up with in their article and in their investigation, that there were very strange cases when American warships docked in Indonesia in 2015, 2016. They performed some activities which were not allowed by Indonesian law, which were not permitted. Basically, taking blood samples without permission is that I remember these details, or inquiring about possibly taking rabid dogs. In Indonesia, some parts of Indonesian islands such as Java are endemic zone for rabies. So Indonesian authorities became very alarmed, and this investigation caused a lot of stir. So definitely wherever areas you talk about connected with the death of Russian Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, there is a lot of concern whether there can be any similarities and coincidences happening in Ukraine, in this part of the world, in Africa and Italy, because as we know, the activity of American biolabs is quite spread out. As part of my own investigations, I saw one of the laboratories in Georgia before the conflict of 2008, and we were taking on a tour into this lab, and we were being convinced by the Georgian authorities that this biological lab is only for peaceful purposes. So at this moment, we have increased interest to the investigation of what really happened to, in the case of Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, and it definitely is a big subject for Indonesian media.